With mass shootings and the explosion of gun violence nationwide, there's a push for tougher gun control laws. One clinical psychologist says some of the main causes are teens in the U.S. enduring chronic trauma, violence, and poverty. Dr. Jim Black, director of the Youth Services Division of Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia, joins us now. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Emily. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jim, thank you for being here. Now, you argue that chronic trauma has a profound impact on kids and teens. What is chronic trauma, and do you see this with your work in Philadelphia?
Well, we absolutely do, Emily, and it is a terrible problem. And it's something that not just me, but everyone in the field recognizes as a terrible problem. A lot of people are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, but what we're talking about here is something that's really qualitatively different. We're talking about kids being exposed over long periods of time to tremendous violence, trauma, loss, and we know that this has a tremendous impact in many ways, many levels on kids and teens and their development.
Oh, the stories you must know and have seen firsthand must be heartbreaking. So most of these kids have access to a gun or could easily get one, but why would they want one?
Well, I think if you ask them, they would tell you one word, it's protection. And so when there's so many guns out there and so many of the kids and others have guns, when you don't have one, it really puts you in a vulnerable position. And so I think the kids, if you ask them, why do you have it? They would say protection. And then we know that, if you have a gun, it gives you a certain sense of power. It makes you a somebody. Without a gun, you can be seen as a nobody and having no power. And you can find yourself in a very vulnerable situation.
Now we have both chronic trauma and gun availability. How do both of these play into this gun violence we've been seeing around the nation?
Well, the chronic trauma, as I mentioned, has such an effect on brain development. And that brain development includes things like kids' abilities to control their impulses, control their emotions. We know that there are neuroimaging studies that show that it inhibits the development of the cortex. And the cortex is that part of the brain which is responsible for judgment and decision making. So when you have kids whose brains have not properly developed, and they're really operating using the emotional part of the brain, and you combine that with the availability of guns, it's a terrible combination, and of course it leads to the results that we're seeing on the streets here in Philadelphia and elsewhere.
So then, Jim, do you think the status of a kid's family unit, meaning access to like a classic parent setup, also contribute to the problem and the trauma that these kids are facing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one thing we know is that kids need adult supervision. All right, they need people who have these developed brains and have the good decision-making skills and problem-solving skills. And so without that adult supervision, and we know we like to see kids in traditional families, nuclear families, where they get the benefit of two parents that are teaching them, disciplining them, supervising them. Without that, we had four kids late last night on the streets of Philadelphia who were themselves victims of gun violence. And so it really begs the question, where's the adult supervision? Why are they out late? Who's watching them?
And Jim, what can the church and our political leaders do to build up feelings of safety for the youth, especially when you continue to hear stories like the one you did last night?
Well, I think, one of the things we know is that kids need consistency. They need programming. The city itself just announced the other day an anti-violence, anti-gun program. And they know that there are several things they can do. They can have intervention programs, enrichment opportunities for the kids, prevention programs, workforce development. I'm very proud of the fact that Catholic Social Services here in Philadelphia provides programming for kids on a continuum of care, from outpatient to day treatment to residential care. Kids need consistency. They need to know that adults care about them, they love them, and they need adults to look to for guidance and protection.
Well, thank you so much for everything you and your team are doing for our youth. And again, Dr. Jim Black, Director of the Youth Services Division of Catholic Social Services in Philadelphia. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Emily.
Hi, I'm Christine Persichetti, anchor of Currents News. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button on this video. And if you want to see more content just like it, subscribe and click on the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching, because we are putting your faith in the news.